Many moons ago, The Elder Scrolls was Todd Howard's precious. He wouldn't allow anyone else to touch the Elder Scrolls IP. It was too sacred. Only his talented, special team would do the Elder Scrolls justice, apparently, at least in the single-player side of things. There is obviously the MMO, which has been going for a long, long time, but we won't let that ruin the story. Todd Howard wouldn't let anyone else make single-player Elder Scrolls games. In fact, that was the Bethesda thing, that they just wanted to keep it all internal, whether it was the Elder Scrolls, Fallout, the one time they allowed anyone else to work on Fallout, in that case it was New Vegas. There was a lot of drama, at least behind the scenes. Apparently Obsidian, the developer, missed out on a bonus. It was a whole big story, and since then, no one else has been allowed to really work on Bethesda properties. Todd Howard had the clout in the industry, the respect. No one was going to challenge him. Even with the Microsoft buyout, it seemed that was sort of staying put. That rule, that Elder Scrolls was Bethesda's thing when it came to at least that mainline series. But now something seems to have changed. My guess is it is Starfield just being a joke, being laughed at, being the punchline of the internet for a good while. I mean, no one, I think, was happier than Todd Howard was when it came to the Dragon Age Veilguard reveal and subsequent release, because it finally took the heat off of Starfield. Distracted me. I used to talk about Starfield a lot, and then I moved on to Dragon Age the Veilguard. So BioWare did Bethesda a bit of a solid there. But I bring all this up because there was a rumor a little while ago about an Elder Scrolls Oblivion remake. And it sounded a little bit strange because we probably all assumed there'd be a remaster at some point. There's no Steam achievements, for instance, so even though you can mod and everything like that, there's an excuse to even re-release it on PC, on Steam, make it look a little bit more snazzy for people who don't know what a mod is, it's too complicated, re-release it on consoles and so on. They'd make a little bit of money. A remaster would probably make sense. They'd probably eventually do the same with Fallout 3, maybe even Skyrim. Can you believe that they might re-release that one day? Surely not. Surely that couldn't possibly happen. But the Elder Scrolls remake is even more real than we thought before. A month ago or so, it seemed real, but now it's realer. It may actually be happening, according to a credible leak. And it's covered here. And the key thing here is a lot of people thought this remake was not really going to be an actual remake. They might call it that, but it was really just going to be a graphic upgrade. They were going to port the game or something into Unreal 5 and then just do their thing, the technical thing, and make it all shinier and prettier. I thought that was a little bit weird. I'm not a technical person, but I didn't realize that you could just put an old game into Unreal 5 and then make it fancier and snazzy and everything. Doesn't sound like an actual thing. I feel like that would be done more often if it was possible. And my skepticism of that, it now is sort of well-founded because I don't believe it is just going to be a graphic remake. It sounds like it actually is a ground-up remake of Oblivion, and they're changing gameplay systems and potentially a lot of other things, which is interesting. Again, we probably all thought it was just going to be a remaster graphics thing. Now it's a full-blown remake, and supposedly, it mentions here, a mistake was made by a former Virtuos employee. Virtuos, I said last time, I'm not pronouncing that right. I don't care. They've provided us with not just confirmation of its existence, but also insights into gameplay improvements set to be implemented to the original game. As a reminder, this Virtuos studio, as far as I can tell, they've never actually shipped a game ever, like an original game. Now, obviously, this remake's not original, but if it's a ground-up remake, it seems like a pretty ambitious first game, essentially, like beloved IP that, to be fair, it's sort of become a little bit of a meme in recent times. I don't think the Elder Scroll has the same RPG role-playing game respect that it once did. I think it's sort of just fallen off because Bethesda now are a bit of a joke. But still, to be making a ground-up remake of Oblivion when the only things you've shipped are like working on Suicide Squad as like a backup developer helping out with things. South Park Snow Day. I'm cherry picking the really, really bad ones, but they've worked on a ton of stuff as just like a support studio, probably helping a bit on the technical side. I think that a lot of these developers, CD Projekt Red, for instance, Konami with the latest Metal Gear Solid remake that they're releasing, I think they hire this studio, which is based in Singapore, and they get them just to, for the cheap, help out as a support studio on some games. Cheaper than actually hiring people at a full wage. You just farm it out, essentially. That's what it seems like is happening. And now I think Microsoft are doing the same. Instead of doing, I would say, like a faithful ground-up remake of Oblivion and really giving it some love, they seem to have farmed this remake out to make it on the cheap and just recoup as much money as possible. And that's my assumption. Maybe this studio is passionate, they'll do a fantastic job, but it's Microsoft who just seem to ruin everything and just stuff everything up. Like, when have they made a good decision? I can't think of one. Maybe releasing their games again on Steam. I'll give them credit for that. Some people like Game Pass. Personally not a fan. I think the whole subscription thing ruins it, but don't really like a lot of things that Microsoft have done. They just seem to be incompetent and no one ever gets fired. So I think this is their decision. I'd be surprised if Bethesda were 100% happy with this, given their stance in the past of wanting sort of control over the Elder Scrolls. And given this is a ground-up remake, there's going to be changes. It mentions here the game is confirmed to be fully remade, implying significant changes, and some of these gameplay improvements include reworks to stamina, stealth, blocking, archery, hit reaction, and HUD, which I assume interface and all those things, which I think is kind of a shame because the interface of Oblivion, I actually liked that style. I liked that it was actually like a realistic book. They don't do that enough anymore. Like, the Skyrim UI is horrible, it's abysmal, it doesn't suit the universe, it's not immersive at all. And over the years I've found out why. The reason that they don't like immersive interfaces, apparently at least, is because it's really hard to scale them for resolution and so on. It's why if you play a game from, for instance, I'm replaying Dragon Age Origins at the moment, and that does have that sort of immersive interface where it's a real book and you can turn the pages and stuff. It looks really, really nice. But unfortunately, without mods, it's tiny. You've got to get out the magnifying glass if you play it on a high modern resolution. So I think that's why they don't do it so much. Maybe with sort of newer TVs and things coming out, newer monitors, that they just can't be bothered, basically. It's too much work to allow it all to scale to multiple resolutions, which is why we just get every UI these days. It's like boring commercial software that you use at work. It doesn't sort of bring you into the world, but they're remaking all that, they're changing it. I mean, if it was just the interface, it'd make sense. I mean, maybe, again, modern screens and things, they would do that as what they would say is an accessibility thing, maybe. But to be changing the gameplay is interesting. I mean, to be honest, if they wanted to get me excited, talking about changing stamina doesn't get me excited. I want to hear you're getting rid of the stupid level scaling system. I said a lot about that last time I did a video on this remake. It's abysmal. It's even just an immersion-breaking thing that late into the game, if you've been leveling up, you basically have what should be endgame enemies just wandering around the world. The very first, like, beginner dungeon of the game, if you revisit it later, you get enemies in the strongest armor, I think it's glass armor, just takes you out of it. Like, you don't feel like you're getting stronger in that game, because no matter what you do, you get what you think might be the best weapon ever, but then all the enemies have the best weapon ever as well, so you never feel like you're actually getting stronger, getting better. Now I'm this powerful warrior who can destroy anything in my vicinity, but not really, because in fact you're no stronger than you were at level 1 because the enemies just scale to a ridiculous degree. I get a lot of games do the level scaling, so if you haven't played it, you might be thinking, this happens in so many modern games now. But it's especially bad in Oblivion. It's not like tiers of levels, as far as I know, where if you get to level 20, now you're going to be dealing with level 20 to 30 enemies. So when you get to level 30, it'll be 30 to 40 enemies, or some system like that, like a banding sort of thing. It's just, like, each time you level, it feels like the enemies just get immediately stronger, and you feel like you've lost progress by leveling up, which should feel good. You should feel good about gaining a level and new skills and different things like that. So you need to fix the level scaling. If it's genuinely a full-blown remake, they've got no excuse here but to make the game better. This will probably be a bit of a hot take. Some people probably won't like this who are nostalgic about Oblivion, but I kind of think, and I replayed a little bit of it 6 months ago or something. I couldn't get through the whole thing, which should tell you where this is going. I personally think that Oblivion is kind of the Starfield of the Elder Scrolls series. Now, that's modern. Maybe if you go back to the original Arena and so on, maybe that's worse, really, if we're being objective. But I don't really think Oblivion is a great game by any means. In fact, it kind of destroyed RPGs for quite a long period of time, because you have to remember, it came out in 2006, and if you remember the period after that, apart from like Dragon Age Origins, there were very few mainstream RPGs. And part of the reason for that, especially CRPGs, sort of that old school Baldur's Gate 3 style of game, a big reason for that is Oblivion came out, dumbed everything down to make sure that it would work well on the Xbox and appeal to people who didn't normally play RPGs. And then we got stuck with like action-focused RPGs that were really, really just designed for anyone. You could be brainless, you can play this game. That was sort of the target audience they were going for. And Oblivion was a part of that. I personally think that most of what's in Oblivion is worse than in both Morrowind, which came before, and Skyrim, which came after. The dungeon crawling, which I like in Elder Scrolls game, it's at its worst in Oblivion. It's really boring. There's barely any different settings to explore. It's like the same cave. Everywhere you look, you go to a cave, it feels the same. There's barely any assets, it feels like. There's not a lot of interest. Caves, you've got these little temple-y things that just constantly reappear, pop up. It does feel like Groundhog Day every single time that you go into a dungeon in Oblivion. Feels just too samey, not interesting. Puzzles, even dumber than in Skyrim. From memory, the dungeon crawling is not very fun. At its worst in Oblivion, and that's why I say it's kind of like the Starfield of the Elder Scrolls, because the exploration was garbage in Starfield, probably the worst thing about it. In fact, Starfield, they focused on the quest lines, I think, and that, to be fair, is what Oblivion does as well. I think the best thing about Oblivion, if you want to get the most out of it, is the quest lines, and just following, not necessarily the main quest. I mean, then you got to deal with Oblivion Gates. They're not fun. They need to revamp them as well. They just feel too mazy and repetitive if you keep doing them. But the Dark Brotherhood questline, for instance, plenty of just those sort of linear questlines. They're pretty fun in Oblivion. I'd say that they're actually better than a lot of them in, again, Morrowind and Skyrim. Some of the questing is actually at its best in Oblivion. But no excuses. If you're remaking it from the ground up, fix the exploration so the dungeon crawling is more interesting. Get rid of the friggin' level scaling. Just get that out of the game. Redesign it. You can't actually get it any worse. It's not like the remake of different genre, but Silent Hill 2, for instance, where it's like, this is a classic gem that people love. There's a lot to live up to. And to be fair, I think the devs for Silent Hill 2 did a fantastic job. Not really the case with Oblivion. Like, keep the quest lines the same. Don't change what's good. There's this awesome murder mystery quest in the Dark Brotherhood questline. I won't spoil it, but it's really good. Keep that in there. But everything else, you can't really fuck it up. You can't fuck up the level scaling situation. Just make it like almost any other RPG, and you'll be doing a better job. You'll be improving the game. Do that for sure. And I'm giving you my wish list now that we know it is genuinely going to be a remake. But to be honest, if you're just being totally realistic with yourself, like, they farmed this out to a cheap studio who's never delivered their own game before. What are the chances they don't just muck up the whole thing and it's just a complete technical mess? I mean, it's Unreal Engine 5. From what I've heard from devs, Unreal Engine 5 isn't actually bad, but because so many of the studios just seem to hire morons who are not hired on merit, they don't know how to do their job, so many of these games come out and are just full of technical issues. And the whole thing's a mess for the customer, for the buyer of the game. They're stuck with an abomination that seems to never get fixed. What was Jedi Survivor made on? Was it Unreal Engine 5? Because that game is still a mess on PC. Probably wasn't even made on that engine. I'm just ranting about something that I'm annoyed about. But it still happens way too much technical issues. And for a big sort of open world game like Oblivion, if there's a big focus on graphics to make that the selling point for why people should rebuy it, instead of just downloading the Sky Oblivion mod, of course, which is sadly coming out pretty soon. Feel pretty bad for those modders, but I think it's going to be about the graphics that they'll be really trying to push. So chances are it's going to be a technical mess. These people don't have any of their own RPG experience. I doubt any of them have worked on an original RPG, judging from the studio being in Singapore, where I doubt there's that many gaming studios, realistically. So are they going to do this justice, or is it just going to be a cheap hack job? That's my gut feel, and I mean, there's not a lot of details yet. Apparently there's going to be a Microsoft event maybe on January 23rd. Maybe that's even confirmed. It does mention an announcement image, so maybe that's definitely happening. So in about a week's time, it might get shown off. We can see, is it something to maybe get excited about? Or is it just the next thing to laugh at? Even though Todd Howard's not behind it, we'll miss out on a few of those memes and things. He'll probably just do he's probably contracted to do some marketing. That's going to be his thing. I mean, that seems like his thing anyway these days. Does he even work on the games anymore? Or is he semi-retired and they just get him out on the stage to hype the next big thing up? Like, he's getting pretty good at the line, because like Starfield, that was just peak, like real, just the hard sell, given the state of that game. Like the old days, if you can climb that mountain and do this, yeah, that's exaggerating a little bit and maybe overdoing it, but the Starfield sell, he went all in with that. So I'm sure they'll get him out to do the same with the Oblivion remaster, even if it turns out to be a total mess. But couple of things that could happen here. Maybe this will actually fix Oblivion. It will turn out to be the best game it could possibly be. It'll be redemption for all those issues back in 2006. They might even throw in the horse armor for free as like a good faith way of going about it. This is a remake. We're gonna get it right this time. We're not gonna make the same old mistakes. It could be that. That may be delusion. It may just be a total technical clusterfuck that Microsoft farmed out for the cheap. I'm leaning that way, unfortunately, but in a week we'll find out, presumably. Thanks for listening. I'll see you on the next one. Cheers. Bye.